I'm real happy to be here. I want to thank all of you for coming, but also for Mike and all the work he's done to prepare the papers and the overheads and clean up my act. But there are many other volunteers that work at this museum, and I know some of you that have been here before know them. Am I coming through back there? Okay.
Just start off.
This is the Garand. It just happens that Ernest brought in a real Garand M1, and maybe he'll tell us a little bit about the rocket launcher when we
We'll
get
do that later.
later. Yeah, okay. I do feel a little uncomfortable because I'm talking about things that I haven't talked about almost forever. I got out of the service, and I don't think Mike knew this, but it was 70 years ago yesterday.
Wow.
Wow.
And when I went home, the family, nobody asked me what I'd done, and I'm glad they didn't. I didn't feel like talking about it, and so I had made it intentional not to remember. And I did a good job of wiping out my memory, and I went on to finish my school at Iowa State College. And of course there were veterans there, and they didn't want to talk about it either. So I'll tell you later what it was that brought back some of the memories, and we can look at that.
Well, but when did you join up? Where did you do your basic training?
Oh, yes.
And that gets into our pictures.
I'm not sure is that on the handout. It was in the first basic training was, somebody mentioned Fort Belvoir, you mentioned one of the fellows, and I was in Virginia. And then after that 13-week training, we went into the ASTP program, which was supposed to train us to be officers. But as sometimes happens, things don't work out that way. So we were in Washington, D.C. for a while, and that was just a few weeks. And then Eisenhower needed men in the infantry. So he closed down that program, as far as I know, and sent us all to the infantry. So we went to an infantry basic in Camp Swift, Texas. And that's where I trained more with these various weapons that you'll see here.
So this was your first one.
That's the first one. And my main weapon was the BAR, the Browning Automatic Rifle. And it's shown there, and you can see it a little better than in some of the other pictures. We also the Thompson machine gun, and yeah, the grease gun that had a little larger caliber. The both the BAR and the M1 rifle fired a .30 caliber, so you could interchange that. So these are, and you're all acquainted with the hand grenade. You can pick one up there, Linda. That's that's the launcher, but be sure don't pull the pin.
Pass it around?
No, they'll be able to see it later probably. And that grenade, this is a grenade launcher, which also Ernest had, and we'll see it later. It hooks on to the end of the rifle, and the gas pressure in the M1 pushes it out.
Maybe follow your write-up, because your write-up has
Yeah.
a good history of everything, and then I'll just move the pictures along with that.
Okay. It's interesting that we have two people there whose father were in the 102nd Infantry, and is it Barbara and Dave. So they were in a little different regiment, but basically in the same place. The picture that's shown there, that one, shows a portion of our company, G Company, and I cut it out, and I happen to be in the top of that picture. And at one point, when we were in Fort Dix, around Washington, D.C., we had a little dance band. And that band is shown there, and I'm playing the trombone. I'll tell you more about the trombone later.
So you had a chance, you said, to go into New York City?
Yes, we did some recording with the dance band while we were waiting to assemble to get on the group of ships that took us overseas. And we really didn't know where we were headed until we got on the ship. And then over the loudspeakers, they started giving us language lessons, and they were French and German. So that was our first clue. When we arrived at Normandy, we disembarked by going over the, I know that doesn't show too well, but in full gear and with weapons and a backpack, we climbed down on cargo nets, which isn't the easiest to do, but when you're young, that makes a difference. And then we joined the Higgins boats, and that is the boat that took us to the Cherbourg Peninsula. So we landed in Normandy, but it was considerably after D-Day. So they weren't shooting at us at that point. But we could see a lot of the damage that had been done.
So that was 1944?
That was in 1944, right. And we stayed at, in that area, staging area, still with the band instruments. The captain wanted us to have a regimental band, and I happened to be the drum major, but then we had our little dance band. So we had an opportunity for a few weeks to use that. The field we were in, you've heard of the hedgerows, and there may be a 9-acre field that's circled by some of the hedges, which it made it difficult for our landing troops to deal with the Germans that had so many hedgerows to hide behind. But this was a nice grassy field, very wet, and it rained quite a bit. So it started out a grassy field, but by the time we had marched around, I think there was probably 6 inches of mud. And so the pup tents we stayed in were had to be very careful, take our boots off and not mess up the pup tent. I was in the, let's see,
I can point out what's going on there.
Yeah, that map is a general map of where the 102nd served, and from the beginning to the end. Now, I didn't finish up of where they did, but nevertheless, that's an area in the point where France joins Germany and Belgium and Holland. And so that's the area that we served in.
Let me just highlight a few things here. Get out of the way. I was trying to find a better map that covered all of Europe. But basically, what I was able to find is a map where I could more or less plot the general direction of the 102nd. Here's Arnhem. This is the Netherlands. You're right up along the German border. The Rohr River is back in here. The Rhine River is actually, Rhine actually comes down through here. And this more or less reflects the period that actually comes after when, Brad, you were there. The 102nd was deployed all the way on the left flank of what was the 12th Army Group, which was our forces here under General Bradley. 21st Army Group was the British, and they had the area all up through Holland, up into the Ruhr. And what happened is during the Battle of the Bulge, which you were there just kind of at the beginning of it, which was really down back along, way back in here, the 102nd was so far on the left and up forward that they ended up actually being separated from the rest of the 12th Army Group. So Bradley, much to his dismay, because of direction by Eisenhower, attached the 102nd and the other divisions which are part of that to the British. So they were on actually the northern flank of the Battle of the Bulge while all that fighting was going on. And Brad will tell us a little bit because it was right about his time. Once the Bulge was finally pushed back, the 102nd, along with the 21st Army Group and everything, moved up in February with a major crossing of the Ruhr River, which was one of the major defense lines for Germany. By March, you were up along on the Rhine, and what's depicted here was the major assault by Bradley and everyone to finally cross the Rhine. And then once we were across, most of the German forces kind of collapsed, and they were able to push all the way up into the Ruhr. And as best as I could determine, the 102nd followed along on the far left flank of 12th Army Group, was eventually attached to the British, and followed this general direction all the way up to the Elbe River, where in April of 45, the 102nd linked up with the Russians. And that's pretty much generally the area where the 102nd ended up at the end of the war.
Mm-hmm. And we were under Monty
Yes.
for a while.
Yeah, and that was the whole end of this thing. You were really under Monty. But anyway, so where Brad, unfortunately, I was trying to find something more down along this area. But you'll just have to tell us what went on down there.
He has a book of the 102nd with him that has some good maps in it. And I don't have that book, but I have looked at it. Lineage was one of our main objectives for the 102nd because it was right on the Ruhr River. To get there, we had to walk across some frozen fields of sugar beets. And if you can imagine, with equipment, walking across diagonally a field that has sugar beets, every step you take, you slip, because this is one of the coldest winters they've had, and that contributed to a lot of problems. The next, after we left the sugar beet field, we walked to on a nice road, but it had its problems too. If you've heard of tree bursts, the tree bursts were something the Germans planned. We happened to walk on this road that had tall trees on either side and big limbs up above. And they would try to shoot their 88 into the top to burst those limbs so that they would fall down on the troops and do probably more damage than they could do otherwise. Fortunately, we weren't hit by any tree bursts, but we worried about it. Getting into the edge of Linnich, it was a time when we took shelter in a house that was on a little road, and we were in the basement with an open window where we could see out right a level of this road. And we saw the tank coming down that road, and we assumed when we heard it that it was one of our tanks. It turned out to be a German tank. And I asked the sergeant, I said, you remember the tanks in the back don't have as much armor. And I said, I know I could launch a grenade from this window because actually the tank was as close as here to the end of the room. And I said I could hit it and knock it out. And then the master sergeant said, no, they don't know we're up this far yet. So that would give away our position. So you think of some crazy things to do, but somebody thinks a little better later. I think that has a picture of a tank in Linnich that was probably taken off the internet, or there may be one in your 102nd book. The next town, I think, is Immendorf, and it seems like all of the towns over there ended in Dorf, and that I don't know that much German, but it probably means city or town or something like that. So in Immendorf, it was outside that town in a field that one of my buddies was killed. The BAR has a large capacity because it's like a machine gun, and so it uses up a lot of ammunition. And they assign 2 armor bearers to the person that's carrying the BAR. And so when we got into this field, we laid down in kind of a triangular formation about 40 feet apart. And right away, the snipers knew pretty well the area because they had just left that field. And unfortunately, they shot Jack, one of our armor bearers, and his twin brother was also in that formation, and they were carrying ammunition for me. He was also hit with a bullet through his helmet, but the bullet went through the helmet and out the back of the helmet without hitting his head. And that is a pretty hard thing for somebody to do. His brother was killed by a bullet that hit him in the neck. And so Jim was the twin that lived, and he wanted to go back and see if his brother was dead, and the medic said yes, he was. So it's a little difficult, but I watched his brother Jim when he got hit by a mortar blast and could see his arms bleeding, and he left to go back to the medic and expected to come back, but he had too many wounds. So I didn't see him then for a long time, and that was another good thing to see him again. When I was then alone with my BAR, it just happened that it misfired and jammed. And so what would I do? I saw a German burp gun, and I picked it up, and it, of course, fires different shells than we have. But I gave some blasts up where I thought those snipers might be. And then I was afraid that our men would hear that blast from the German burp gun. So I want to get out of there. So I picked up one of the twins' rifle and took it on with me. The other thing that happened in that Immendorf area is we were temporarily joined to the a tank battalion, and we were located on the side of a hill, and there was a valley, and on the other side of that valley were German tanks, and we could see them, and we could see they were firing towards us, and that's a little shaky. But then we looked around behind us, and some of our tanks were on the ridge behind us, so they were actually shooting at our tanks, not at us. So we just laid low and prayed, and we're fortunate that the German tankers had good enough shooters in their tank to shoot at the tanks and not to us.
So this was in the wintertime, very cold and damp and everything.
Yes.
Before you got in.
I think most all of December and November. I know they wanted to warm us up one time, take us off in groups of about 25 to a Thanksgiving dinner on Thanksgiving of November 44. And when we got there, we were very hungry because we'd been eating C rations and K rations. And it turned out that somehow the tanks of the food spoiled. So when we got there, we didn't have anything to eat but more K rations. So there's some disappointments. We were proceeding forward, following the Germans, and actually jumped into some of the foxholes that they had prepared for themselves. And we were told that they had beads on every foxhole. The guy next to me in another foxhole took his helmet, put it on his M1, and stayed down below the foxhole, but lifted it up, and sure enough, right away, he got a shot in his helmet. And unfortunately, Jim Welch was 2 foxholes down. For some reason, I don't know why he stood up, but he did, and was immediately killed. That's the opportunity I had to use the grenade launcher, and you'll see later how the launcher fits right over the M1, and you can still stay down below the foxhole, and I was just aiming it where I thought those shots were coming from. So we did move on from there, and let's see.
Don't forget the trench foot one.
Oh,
Too early.
no, I think that's a good one. I think there may be a better picture in some places about the trench foot. You see, we were, I think I covered some of this in the handout, but our feet got so cold and wet that they would swell up, and occasionally, twice that I remember, they took us back to Holland where we had some showers and got new uniforms. If we'd done that more often or had some way of keeping our socks dry, I wouldn't have gotten the trench foot. In fact, they made a routine examination of our company and found that we all had swollen feet, and mine were cold and numb, but I figured that they would probably just from there maybe clean us up and send us back. But instead, they sent us to Liège Hospital. And in the hospital, there were pictures that I had one place of some of the feet that were in almost black. In fact, some of them were amputated at the ankle, and the toes, and all of them had been swollen. And so I was, thank God that my feet did not have to be amputated. It was at this Liège hospital that I heard the buzz bombs come over. And they're a slow flying, low flying, big bomb, and have a very distinctive hum. And so because of that, the hospital group airlifted us to the southern part of England. When I got over there, I realized that the Germans were softening up that area for the Battle of the Bulge. So that was mid-December when that happened. And I did learn from the Stars and Stripes paper that that hospital was hit by a bomb the day after we left. So I've been very fortunate all through to make it.
So did you find it difficult digging a foxhole in that area where you were before you went back to the hospital?
That was
I remember her dad saying how tough it was to dig a foxhole in that.
It was. And I only started one, and then we moved on. And we were lucky enough to find other foxholes. One we jumped into, they were about 5 feet deep. So that's a lot of digging in that kind of soil. And at that point, we were in a defensive position. We could see the Germans, but we didn't fire on them, and they didn't fire on us. An interesting thing happened in that foxhole at night. I was feeling around the foxhole, and I found a lid that somebody previously had taken, and the enamel on the tin lid was scratched with the Lord's Prayer. And I ran my hands over that, and I made a statement to God that if I made it through, I'd serve Him the rest of my life. Well, you know, people say a lot of things, and then when I got home, I forgot all about that. I'm glad He didn't forget about me. But that I always thought about that piece of metal that somebody left a message. And what do they say? There are no
Atheists.
no atheists in this foxhole. And that proved that.
So what was your normal day like? You know, there, when you'd advance up, you'd advance by different squads? And
Yeah, mainly by regiments. We were assigned either to hold back or go forward. And like with Lineage, the 102nd had two that formed a pincer movement around Lineage. And the day would be, well, in all of these towns that you showed, it would be kind of a mopping up as you'd go through the towns. And they would leave some soldiers back, and you needed to deal with that. The actual, when we stopped to eat and when we didn't, as I say, if we'd had more warm socks, that would have been the thing that we would want more than food, I think. I wanted to mention a couple things. Does anybody else have any questions?
yeah, please ask any if you'd like.
I mentioned that when we arrived in Cherbourg, the captain wanted to have us bring our instruments along, and I don't know what he was thinking, but we did in Cherbourg. We were marching and doing things just to get ready while others were getting ready to join us to move up. And he came in one day to the band and said, "Now, we're going to move up tomorrow. Take all your instruments, wrap them in this green waterproof tape, and I'm going to put them in one of these barns here in France." And then he said, "After the war, we'll come and get them." That was a big joke. So when I was taken off the line, first I mentioned Liège Hospital, and then the hospital in England. From there, we went down and got on the Queen Mary, which had been refitted as a hospital ship. So we were on stretchers, and the stretchers were hung from loops. And this shows the Queen Mary. And when it reached Fort Dix, we were put on a train and sent to a convalescent hospital, of all places, near Colorado Springs, Camp Carson. So I was there recuperating, and at that time I ran into Jack Grorich, the fellow that I saw leave the front line wounded and hadn't seen. And so we had a chance to talk a little bit, naturally. He was from St. Louis. His family lived there, and at the convalescent hospital, after we could walk around, they told us they had a duty, and I forget what they called it, Mike, where we went to different places to encourage the businesses and plants to continue to work for the war effort. And the one place they sent me was the Century Electric Company in St. Louis. So they had just at that time, a memorial service for Jack Grorich, and Jim was there, and so I got a chance to meet their family. I'm jumping around a little bit. But I wanted to tell you about this trombone because it was probably 20 or 30 years after I got home that my wife called me, and I was in the office in Boulder, and she said, "You'll never guess what just came in the mail." It was the trombone.
Wrapped in the green, was it still wrapped in green?
Yeah,
tape?
original wrapping, and it, Pat has it, or will. It had my address as the address of the fraternity house I lived at the time, and so the fellow that was in the band was able to get addresses for all of the band members and ship them out. So that was.
Do you still play it?
Well, I don't. It's not because it's a reverent it's instrument now, but it's just, you know, the lips and the.
So Brad, when you played, did you play for the morale of your own like regiment and stuff, or did you play for a local village and people, or something?
Well, Michelle, when we were in France, we had a regimental band, and I happened to be the drum major, and we did march around, and that's what infantry people like to do. I think that's probably the captains that like that. So there, and then a small group, we did play as a dance band, but not to any of the French people around. I did learn what it meant to say pomme de terre in France, and that's apple of the ground, which you probably knew. But I learned it from some of the phrases that were coming across the loudspeaker on the boat as we were going over. The handout you have has a picture of, maybe that was that one. Our granddaughter was in the Air Force in south of Birmingham. I forget the name of the town, in Alabama. And she was to be commissioned as second lieutenant. And she called and wanted Peg and I to come see that, and also her mother. And her mother was to pin one of the bars on, and I was to pin the other bar on. So she said, "Now, would you bring your uniform?" Well, my uniform was lost long ago. So I went around to so many Army stores trying to piece together, now the belt was one place that's not even the right color. These pants don't match this, and didn't have any combat boots. And the thing I found most difficult to find was the little cap that an infantry had, you know, a little blue, yeah, it had a little blue cord on it. And it just happened that I called Jim Grorich, who had moved to Denver and was a minister, Lutheran minister in Denver, and he loaned me his hat. So that's the hat that you see on me in that picture. When I pinned the second bar on her shoulder, of course I was a sergeant, she was a lieutenant, I had to salute her. And then I gave her a kiss. Now, have you ever heard of a sergeant kissing a second lieutenant?
Were you in Montgomery?
Yes, that's where it was. Thanks, Michelle. I just didn't remember the name of the town. Then she went to Air Force Kirkland in Albuquerque. And she had a couple medals. She was a very good soldier, very athletic. Unfortunately, she contracted a disease, and what was it called? Strep, some kind of a strep, and in less than a week she had passed away. Her mother couldn't even make it from Denver there in time. So, of course, we went down for the memorial service. But that's how I was able to get the different things that go on the uniform. Now, the Army store in Boulder, I got some patches, and I sent away for some medals. Oh yeah, you want to throw that up here? Her mother, our daughter that isn't here today, Lena, had her uniforms packed away, and she was in the process of making bags to take to hospitals for some of the kids to put on their little walkers. And she says, well, I think I'll make one for Dad and Mom. So this is one she made for me. She likes to sew. Down at the bottom, it says, Grandpa, 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 Grandpa. And then this is one of the, one of her medal of, yeah, commendation. Sometimes I forget which one that is. But anyway, I enjoy carrying this around to hold things that I have. But of course, it reminds me of both my daughter and the granddaughter. I think. Oh yeah.
So you said when we first came in here a few years ago, you went back and traced your steps through where you were during the war. How'd that go?
Oh no, I would like to have done that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you did.
Yeah, what I did. Would you hand me that hat? I think, was it 3 weeks ago you had people talking about honor flight, and do you all know what the honor flight was? Where
Well, may want to mention it anyway.
yeah, the honor flight I went on was in 2012. They have many places around the country where they fly World War II and now even other vets back to Washington, D.C. to see the war memorials. And there's no expense to the veteran. It's all, and no government money. And of course they want to keep, they give you a hat, and then one of the fellows that day had one of those colored shirts.
Right.
And so the honor flight took us from DIA, and we were there 3 days and 2 nights, I think it was. Put us up at the Baltimore hotel and bussed us down into Washington, D.C. and fed us and banquets and everything. Does anybody else?
So what did you do after the war to unwind?
Well,
And how did you and Peggy?
what? Oh,
Both questions. Yes.
all right. That was an unwinding in itself when
It happened.
I went back to Iowa State to complete my engineering studies, and then I still had a couple years to go. Peg and I got married the year before I graduated from college, and let's see.
Well, how did you two meet?
We met in Methodist Church in Des Moines, Iowa.
How about grade school?
Oh, yeah.
We're sorry we got you in that pickle.
Maybe Peg ought to tell.
Yeah. I don't want her to tell everything. We didn't get engaged till the 4th grade. No, it was after I got back from service that while I was in school, we dated quite a bit. And then we lived together for the last year at school. And then,
When we were
You want to
dating-
clarify that?
Yeah.
what?
You want to clarify that?
Well, we were married.
And when we were dating, I was also dating the boy next door there in Des Moines. And Brad had a big black dog. And so he was around a lot when we were dating. And one night we came home, we were out, and the dog was sitting on the porch, and Brad said, "Whose dog is that?" Well, it belonged to the guy next door. So I admitted that it was
So how did you get from Des Moines, Iowa to
Yeah.
Boulder, Colorado?
That was an easy ride because being in a hospital, convalescent hospital in Colorado Springs, I fell in love with Colorado. So when we were married, we decided to move to Colorado. And fishing was one of my hobbies, and skiing. So this was a natural place to be.
What did you do in Boulder with your degree?
Yeah, what did you work with?
Oh, in Boulder, I was a real estate appraiser for about 35 years, and starting out with residences and then doing commercial appraising. And in fact, I've appraised quite a few things in the Broomfield.
and mentioned the girls.
Oh, which girls? So our 4 girls, Linda is a nurse and still doing some nursing, and Pat lives out in Brighton, and they have a 5-acre ranch just got a new horse, Reba. Polly was living in Seattle and didn't like the temperature out there. So against my wishes, she came back without a job. And was that 2 years ago? And it was difficult to find a job. And at her age, you know, she's more than 35.
You snuck around that one pretty good.
She did get a job in probably less than a month, and now works at Tough Shed, designing work. She has an architect's degree. And then Lena is at home today, couldn't make it. But, and then, well, Pat, didn't we mention your horse, Reba?
Is that a Bronze Star?
Pardon me?
Bronze Star?
Yeah, bronze.
Oh, I don't know whether I mentioned that in here or not.
No, I think we didn't. Didn't have enough space to capture everything.
Well, I think it is mentioned on the back side where the patch is that one time the captain came down and talked to our top sergeant and said we'd lost contact with our left flank. And so I volunteered to take a guy and walk and find that contact. And I suppose maybe a couple miles we walked, and we could hear the Germans shooting at us, but they didn't hit us. And finally we made the contact and gave the password. And, so I wanted to relay back to our group that we had made contact, and they were able to do it electronically. But on the way back, they asked us if we would take some German prisoners and some of our wounded men back to the MPs. And that's when I picked up that spoon. The Germans, very clever, had a combination spoon and fork. And in fact, you can see the swastika on here. And so I picked up that and picked up a P-38 from an officer. So that's like a Luger pistol. And then went back to the unit.
What was the password you remember?
I think it was swordfish. No, I wouldn't remember. Wasn't that Amos and Andy that had swordfish for? You probably haven't had a chance to read this handout, but I think the picture there, Mike wanted a picture of back when, in fact, this was after the basic in Fort Belvoir, and I was home, and they took that picture.
Good-looking guy.
Brad,
Yes.
what was your mission when you landed at Normandy, since it was after action? What were you there for?
Well, we landed in Normandy at the outer peninsula of Cherbourg, and our idea was to get ready and wait for other troops to come to move up into Germany. So we just were biding our time in a way, and that's why we had a chance to play the instruments a little bit and get our feet muddy.
So that was a train ride from about, what, St. Lo or so? Or
I think it was, that's probably right. You've heard of the 48 trains, the trains that they used over there to carry 8 horses or 40 men. And of course we were the 40 packed in. And that took us up a ways. We marched some, had some bus rides that took us up into that area.
how many troop ships were used for the 102nd?
Well, the troop ships, it was just the ship we had out of the harbor had all of our division, but the number of ships, I think there were 150 ships in our convoy to go over to Cherbourg.
Well, the division would be about 25,000 men.
Oh, no, there weren't that many.
Not that many.
No, so it must have been,
20.
yeah. You could see how hazy I am on some of the details.
Do you remember the name? John Erickson? Is that one of them?
Of the ship?
Yeah.
That wasn't it. I did read it someplace, but I don't recognize that name. Is that where your dad was?
Yeah, he was on that one, yeah.
The Germans had a pretty free reign with their submarines in that area just off the East Coast, and did get a lot of ships sunk.
Brad, were you able to stay in touch with people in the States with letter writing, or was the mail reliable?
I think it was reliable and slow, and we had mail call. Not too often, but yes, we were able to write her.
Keep asking questions.
Yeah.
Dad, is this what you were talking about that fit on the rifle?
Well, no.
Just like,
Is Ernest here? I guess not. That's okay. I didn't realize
Since you picked that
how
up.
heavy this was.
How long has it been since you picked one of those up?
Oh, probably 30 years. But this one, the BAR is actually twice as heavy as this. And this right now feels pretty heavy to me. This grenade launcher fits over this snaps on the rifle, and the power that shoots the bullet, there he is.
So did every GI, were they issued this combination, or only did certain people in the squad have grenade launchers?
Well, I carried 2 or 3 of these all the time.
Okay.
Be careful, don't step back, don't you fall back there. So basically what it is, it's a really high-powered blank that actually propel these. Some of you have already talked about this earlier. Different ranges are on this pipe. They go up to increments of like 20 yards. At full, if they're sitting clear down to this, they'll shoot about 100 yards easily. Basically, everybody carried grenades, so it was easy to put these on there. What kept the pin, the lever from falling off on the grenade launcher, was when it was sitting on here, there's a little lever on the back side here that would actually hold it down. I've had numerous occasions where the stupid thing would bounce and nothing would happen. So the guys would actually bend these out a little bit.
Ernest, don't pull the pin.
There you go. Here, hold on to this for me, would you? So they would bend these out a little bit, so when it actually hit the ground, the grenade would actually bounce out. I've talked to one other soldier from World War II that when this thing shot off, it landed in the area where some Germans were. The German picked up the grenade, picked it up like this, and tossed it back at our guys. Because these things were 100% liable, but they were very effective when they did go off. Because you can figure most guys could probably throw about 50, 60 yards. And that's the maximum, the shortest distance this will shoot. With this on there, you can shoot one round through this with a regular live round. But it doesn't give enough pressure for your gas rod, operating rod, to recycle the gun. So you'd have to basically take this off. So with it set up on there, once this hits, this would pop off, and there you go. That's what the whole idea of a grenade launcher was supposed to be. Basically, the design of it is the same way your bayonet would sit on there. Your bayonet would come back over top of this and lock onto here. Well, they went and did this design here, and this pin right here actually pushed down your gas rod a little bit to give it a little bit more pressure. So it would sit down like this, and this is a one-shot fire deal, because the operating rod would cycle it back and lock it into position. And then you have to be real cautious on what you're firing through it, because obviously you don't want to shoot a live round through a butt of a grenade. But most guys, you'll hear a lot of guys say that, well, why can't you fire this from your shoulder? Well, you're figuring this thing's pretty heavy. You got a lot of weight on the back of you. So most guys would actually set it down on the ground, it's like this, and they would sit like this, and they would go like this and decide which way they want to go. Different ways of shooting it. I actually did some videos a while back on how to shoot one of these. And then I think it was the Broomfield Memorial Day picnic. I did a demonstration with this, actually with this one here. I actually got a bunch of dummy ones that we use for reenactments. And yeah, they're very effective. I could say.
What's that cord up there in that picture? Was that to retain?
That doesn't have anything to do with
No,
it.
it has nothing to do with it. That might have been a training exercise that they had. It's just, that one there is a totally different type of grenade. That's actually, I don't know what they actually call them. I can't remember. It's off the top of my head. But this here was more common because The fact being is everybody had grenades back then. And that type of deal there, I didn't think it lasted very long through the war. But the thing with the kick on these things, has anybody shot a 45-70? Okay, you know what the kick is like that. It's similar to this. This thing would bust your shoulder all apart. No, that the gun's real heavy. So you basically dig it into the ground, and you want to duck your head, pull your head down so your helmet's protecting your head. Just because, like I said, they're not really effective, real close range, and sometimes these things might not go off, or the pipe is only sheet metal, so it could explode in your face. But yeah, it's pretty much the same idea of the German had one. They didn't use it very much, but they did have a grenade launcher that actually hooked up to the K98. Wasn't effective. They quit using it very quickly. And how long did you use one of these? All throughout the war?
I used it 3 times.
Only 3 times?
Yeah.
Yeah?
But it was effective.
Yes, it was. When they worked and when they with fire, they were very effective. And it's a little bit noisier than a regular round because the fact being is your head's right here. So you're sitting like this, your gas is going to be coming right out your face. And that's why you duck your head down and keep your head covered. I think it was Memorial Day weekend. I had one of my dummy ones that we use for reenactments actually explode in my face. And so that's why I keep everybody back and explain to them that's what happens sometimes. So I don't want to steal your highlight from you, so
Thank you.
you can carry on.
Thanks, Ernest.
Yeah, no worries.
Uh,
Do we have any more questions at all right now?
Yeah, one more. How many weekend passes or whatever did you get, and where'd you go?
Yes, pretty good.
Oh, that's interesting you'd ask. In Fort Belvoir, that's a 13-week basic. And, of course, you want to get out as much as you can. And I only got out twice. One time was to go into Washington, D.C. The other time, one of the fellows said, you know, they have the Olympic tryouts for swimming in Washington, D.C., and they're required to let servicemen do that. So we got a big kick out of that. Now, I was on the swimming team at Iowa State, but I was not an Olympic swimmer. But it gave me an opportunity to leave the basic training. Now, in Texas, Camp Swift, Texas, that's also a 12 or 13-week basic. I can't remember more than one, and I don't want to. We went in to see the girls that were swimming at the university pool. I didn't know. I haven't told Peg about that.
You have now.
So you don't get out very often.
So what's the most trouble you got in and got away with in the service?
I'd say
Worse than.
some of it I'll never know how close I got to getting it, but yeah, I don't know how to answer that.
Well, you're out
Yeah.
messing around on leave and you did
Oh.
some stupid and the captain didn't find out and you said, well, I'm glad he didn't find out. That's what I'm kind of after there.
Oh, yeah.
You know, not the action part. That's
Yeah, actually over in Germany, didn't have any of those experiences at all. But yeah, we, after Fort Belvoir, I think I mentioned that they wanted to have us take the ASTP course to become officers. And so we were in Washington, D.C., living and going to a school for several weeks until they quit that program. And so I went to the USO, dancing. We loved to dance. Peg wasn't along, but
Well, Brad, well, thank you very much, but I hope you'll all stick around, visit some more. We'll set up another table so we can put out your book as well and both of yours. Mike, please visit, yes.
On that grenade launcher right there that he's got on the
Uh-huh.
picture, that is an anti-tank round. I got to look at the picture a little closer.
Oh.
The wire that's actually on it is hooked up to a rocket engine itself. The projectile, the rifle actually pushes it out, and then someone would detonate the cord, the rocket engine.
Oh, that's what the
And
the
that's-
cord's for.
That's one of the anti-tank rounds.
Oh,
Doesn't look like it'd be very accurate.
You're pretty close if you're going to use that.
I mean, they've had competitions in the day on, you can basically hit a 5-gallon bucket at 75 yards.
Oh, yes.
One more quick question. Didn't you provide some security on the buses in the city when they had the strike?
Oh, yes, you mentioned.
oh, yeah. We were headed to Fort Dix to get ready to go in the ship to go overseas. And that happened to be at the time that Philadelphia had a transit strike. And at that time, FDR wanted to break the strike, so he picked our regiment to go on every bus, rail car, and every mode of transportation. We had a live BAR and carrying it, and they actually broke the strike, but we were there probably less than a week, and then went on. I felt not too safe with a BAR fully loaded, and these guys came off of the I guess it was down on the wharf, and they had these hooks. So they walked by as they were getting on the bus. So I didn't feel I was too safe. But anyway, it provided the means to break the strike. I didn't mention, but this is one of the few things I brought back. This goes underneath your helmet and folds down. Unfortunately, when I got home, I used it for a paint. It got paint on it, but
Still looks in good shape.
Want to demonstrate?
Brad, I just want to thank you again so much. We have a little challenge coin for our museum, so we'd like to present that to you just as a remembrance.
thank you very much.
But again, thank you, everyone, and please stick around and visit some more, tour the museum if you haven't, and help us with our donuts and other stuff in the back. So, thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you.
That was marvelous.